Hello, best of your listeners, and welcome to the best real estate investing advice ever show. I'm Theo Hicks. We're back for another episode of the Actively Passive Investing Show. With me today is, as always, is Travis Watts. So Travis, how's it going today?
Hey, doing well. We finally got an official background for those tuning in on video. There it is.
It looks amazing. Maybe I'll see if I can figure out how to do that on my background, but I don't have a green screen like you, so
That's
it
true.
might look a little weird. I might morph in and out on the video, but yeah. So today we're going to be talking about another one of Travis's blog posts. This is a deep topic today, so I'm really excited to dive into this with Travis. And the blog post is entitled "How to Know When to Retire. How much is enough?" Now, before I let Travis describe it. I don't see many people asking this question. I don't see many blog posts covering this topic, and I think Travis did a really good job explaining what he, kind of what we need to do in order to, number one, just be aware of this concept in general, and then number two, what we should do to figure out when, if ever, we have reached the point of maybe we don't need to work as much or continue that grind. So I'll let Travis kind of take it away, and then we'll kind of have our back and forth. So go ahead,
Sure.
Travis.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is kind of an awareness blog. Okay. So, and it's really not talked about a lot, especially out in the real estate space. Not that I've seen anyway. So what I wanted to do is kind of paint a picture, maybe from a different perspective that not a lot of folks have thought about before. So in this blog, I use this story of a CEO of a tech startup company. We'll call it Silicon Valley startup. And so, it starts with kind of the tail end of this guy's career, saying, he just took his company public. He's got stocks that are going to vest over the next 5 years. Once they do, it will be estimated this guy will have about a $5 million payout. So that kind of sounds like the ultimate American dream, right? The ultimate solution that we're all kind of after. But as we dig a little bit deeper, we get a little more into this story, and we figure out that, number one, as I mentioned, this is the tail end of the story, right? So the way this journey started was this guy worked at a Fortune 500 company for the first decade of his working career, had a high salary, had some stock options there as well. So in those first 10 years, walked away with approximately $2 million in total investments, a paid off home, things like this, and then launched his own company. Afterwards, went into business for himself. So he had actually previously sold a company. That was his second venture and kind of the second decade of his life. And then here we're taking a look at the third. And so the question really is as much as that looks like an amazing success story to a lot of folks, potentially, how much is enough? Okay, what was it possibly enough when he had a couple $1 million in a paid off home? Could he have potentially retired, quote unquote, in his 40s, maybe in his 50s? So now he's 60, looking at, okay, 65 is kind of the target. Got a couple kids in their 30s that he wishes he could have spent a lot more time with in his life. I know you and I, Theo, have talked about the previous blog I wrote about the top regrets of the dying and Bronnie Ware's story. And, Bronnie Ware, for those that may not know, was a nurse working in a terminally ill patient care unit, did kind of a poll or survey on people's top regrets before they pass. And the top two were, I never pursued my dreams and aspirations, and I never spent enough time with my friends and family. So, that's a lot to think about. To your point earlier, this is kind of a deep topic if you take it that direction. But if nothing else, I just wanted to inspire the thought that, a lot of people get caught up in these success cycles, right? It's just one business to the next, to the next, to the next. I made 1 million. Now I need to make 2. I made 2. I need 4. I made 4. I need 8. But where do you stop? do you one day just kind of pass away, kind of maybe perhaps like a Steve Jobs, $10 billion in the bank, but kind of a lost family by the wayside and possibly some regrets there. So that's really what the topic's about.
Yeah, 'cause I remember when I initially read the blog post about the top 2 regrets of the dying. So one of them is about essentially like a career focus, and the other one is more family focused. When I first looked at it, I was like, oh well, are these two like mutually exclusive, or can they both be used together, right? Because in this story with George, we've got George, who I'm sure it was his dream to do a startup, but at the same time, he in the story neglected the other part, the other regret. And so I think what he's saying here is that it's not necessarily that you're gonna have both of these regrets when you die. It's just you might have one or the other. And so it's finding that balance, right? It's finding that, okay, well, I'm gonna do this career thing. And I've got a couple of things written down because obviously a lot of people, especially for that kind of person who is able to grow that much success, it's gonna be very difficult for you to not do anything. So there's obviously some options you can do in order to continue pursuing a career without having to work 120 hours per week. But again, when I read that, I first thought, well, is it possible to have neither one of these regrets? And then I think the reason why this blog post is important, especially for people who are just starting out, who have no money at all. I'm like, what are you talking about? It'd be awesome to have $5 million in the bank. Start realizing or to be aware of this up front, so that you can create your strategy, your business plan on maybe not having these 2 regrets. And so an example would be, I was talking to someone, I can't remember what his name was. It was maybe 2 weeks ago on the podcast. And he literally had like an exit plan before, like right when he started. He knew exactly how much money he wanted to get in real estate before he kind of completely stepped away and let it, I think for his case, he was just going to sell everything. Right.
Yeah.
So obviously that's one option. So I maybe wanted to talk about, okay, so let's say I know what enough is. Then what? What do I do after that?
Yeah. I think, to me, okay, this is kind of how I see it, is identify first what is important to you. What are the most meaningful things in your life? What is the purpose of your life? If you had kind of that ultimate life, reasonably speaking, what does that look like? What brings you the most fulfillment? Now, once you kind of have, and this is something that you got to write this stuff down. This can't be just done in your head one time. This is like just setting goals for a lifetime, 10 and 20 year or plus goals. Number 2 is then you have to kind of reverse engineer now. So how much is that going to take to afford that type of lifestyle? And I think what a lot of people find, myself included, is when you really nail this stuff down, you might find it's a lot less expensive than you might think when you really get down to it. I think the problem is, in general, in society, is that we don't stop to think about these things, right? We just think, I'm working now, I'm going to work forever, I'm going to work till my 60s, whatever. And we don't give it much thought, and we just kind of go on the treadmill, right? And then one day you're waking up in your 60s thinking, maybe either A, I have a few regrets about some of these things, or B, like in George's case in the blog, maybe I could have actually kind of pulled the plug back in my 40s or my 50s, spent more time with my kids, maybe traveled a little more, had less, neck and back pain and, those kinds of things, a lot less stress, if nothing else. And I think the purpose is not to say quit working or retire in the traditional fashion, especially if we're talking about someone in their 40s. I think it's about finding what you're truly passionate about. And maybe for George, this truly was his passion, but that's why I point out in there that he's got kids in his 30s he wishes he would have spent more time with. So obviously there's a level of possibly some regret in there. So just trying to find the balance and optimize your life style. That's really what this blog's all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no, I totally agree. So basically, you figure out. I think a good question would be, I can't remember again where this is from. This is not from me, but ask yourself the question, essentially, what if I didn't need money, or like what's a job I'd be willing to do for free is basically what it is. Like what would I be willing to do that I enjoy so much, work-wise. Obviously not like, sit there and watch movies all day or something, but maybe that's what it is. But what would I do? What kind of job would I do? However many hours per week, if I could do it for free, and then that would be kind of what you do once you've retired. And this kind of also reminds me of what we talked about last week, is obviously how you get to this point. There's a million different ways to get to this point. And one of them would be making sure you're focusing on, not overspending in those main areas, the vehicle, the house, and the food last week, and then doing some sort of positive thing as well. But I did have a few things besides that. What I do for free that you could possibly do once you've hit your number, your goal. Obviously, the most important one is going to be passively investing, right? So I know some people's goals in real estate is to actively invest until they've built up a large enough nest egg that they can passively invest with someone else and then live off of that interest. So that would be probably the strategy that results in the most time freedom, because you're just checking, Travis would know more about this than me, but you're just checking the monthly reports and looking at deals, and it's not going to take more than a few hours a week. And there's someone named Holly Williams. Mm-hmm. She's been on the podcast a lot. I interviewed her last week, and she is someone who is like a professional passive investor. All she does is passively invest. That's her job. And so she'd be a good person to, she's been on the podcast a bunch of times. So if you want to figure out what that life is like, you can listen to her podcast. So that was one. Travis, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's my big message to the world too. Obviously, I'm a huge advocate for passive income and passive investing. That's my story. And the point is, you and I, Theo, are very fortunate. We're very grateful, obviously, to have jobs and careers that we genuinely enjoy, right? We like to be creative and expressive. We both write blogs. We both do the podcasting stuff, in various outlets. And that's amazing. But you also have to remember, most people can't do that. Most people aren't doing that. Most people are caught in the golden handcuffs, either a 9-to-5 situation, or they've climbed this corporate ladder so high that they make a really nice salary and there's really nothing else that they could do. So they're kind of trapped, And so until you start, putting some of your income towards investments, whether it be passive investments or not, it's hard to branch away and have this kind of balance that we're talking about, no matter what your approach is. But I think we all need to get there. I mean, we all get there at one point or another, right? I think maybe we talked about that before. What's the average American retirement, like 67 retirement age? I don't know, something like this. And so you've got Social Security, you've got possibly a pension, or your 401k. This is basically passive income at that point, right? You're not having to exchange your hours and your labor in exchange for money. So we're going to get there somehow. At some point, hopefully. It's just a matter of, if you focus on this stuff earlier in life, you can get there potentially a whole lot faster than perhaps your 60s or 70s.
Oh yeah, exactly. And there's all those examples of, if you invested $1 every day or whatever for 20 years, you're a gazillionaire or something like that. So 100% agree. The other one was, again, I've gotten these from, because I do 8 interviews every single week from people, and every single person obviously worked. Most of them, probably 9 out of 10 people, were not born into a real estate family and just, were raising it from birth. Another thing you'll see is that people will, for example, I talked to someone last week. He worked as he's a physical therapist. That was his full-time job. And he was doing some form of physical therapy that was very flexible. Like, I think he'd go to people's houses or something. And so it was very flexible. And then he got a promotion and he was like a corporate physical therapist. So he was traveling everywhere. He was working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And during this job is when he had gotten into real estate, and he was making six figures. And he asked himself, okay, well, I can continue to kind of grind this 80-hour-a-week job, never be home with my, I'm pretty sure he was married. I don't think he had kids. He was married. Not be home with my wife and make a lot of money, or I can go back to my old job, have more flexibility, so that in between, clients, or at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, I can work on my real estate business, so that I can get to the point where I can, maybe still open up my own physical therapy company, or whatever you wanted to do. But the point is you don't have to just, once you catch the real estate bug, just quit your job, right? Just like, oh, I'm done. I'm without having an option. So one option would be to get a more flexible job, so that you can focus on pursuing your dreams and aspirations, so that you can quickly get to this point where you've reached enough and they can transition into something else. So I think that's, because it's funny because I'll talk to one person, and then the next episode I'll talk to someone else that kind of proves what the guy said to be true. And this guy had a job and he got into real estate, and he completely neglected his job for real estate and got fired a few months later. And it ended up working out for him. But if he would have gotten a more flexible job, he could have kept that job and then scaled even faster, because he could just use that income to grow his active or passive investing business.
Yep, exactly. There's also, I was introduced to this video, maybe, I don't even know, a year ago, came across it on YouTube. And unfortunately, this is on the fly right now. I can't remember what the guy's name is, but if you type in, I think, retire at 36 or something like that, retired at 36, there's this guy who had a passion for boats and sailing. That was really his life purpose. It was his hobby. It was his everything. Well, he was like a consultant, if I remember right, like an IT type consultant, made really good money, worked full-time, grinded it out for up until 36, ended up just buying the sailboat and just living out on the boat and in the Caribbean, and I mean, he quote unquote retired at 36 because, and he's the one that introduced me to this concept of enough. He said, that's the hardest thing to do, is recognize, pinpoint that number. This number would be enough for me, and then take action when you hit it, because that's the scariest part, is taking the leap and saying, God, I hope this is enough. I hope I'm right. But it was, for him. And this guy's, who knows, in his 50s now or something. But it's an amazing story, just to hear about this guy's adventures in life, and with his wife, and all the memories and moments that they've had, because he could identify that. His alternative was just more and more and more and more money, but then that would have kept him longer and longer and longer away from sailing. And what if he had passed away, or came, with a debilitating disease or something? I mean, you never know, right? Life is short. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, that story just brought up another thought in my mind, which is why this topic is even more important the younger you are, because that enough is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger the older you get, and the bigger your lifestyle gets. So we all talked about this last week about the kind of the three main areas of life, and the bigger your house is, the more expensive your car is, the more you're used to these things. When you're sitting there saying, all right, what's enough? Well, I want to have a BMW, and I want to have $1 million mansion, and I want this, which is obviously fine, but that number, that enough number, is going to be way higher than if you're in if you're in just graduated from college and you're in an apartment, like, I really just want like a 3-bedroom house, and it'd be nice to have a car, and to be able to go out to a restaurant once a week, and then that could be your number, and that's what you can start working towards. Obviously, it might not be exactly that. It might grow a little bit, but you'll be in a lot better situation, or you'll be in a lot better situation if you start thinking about these things earlier, than if you're kind of really, but again, you still want to think about it, but it's easier the earlier you do it, for that exact reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know that we did talk about that previously, but again, for those that may not have heard the episode, as far as the things like talking about a BMW or a 10-bedroom house or this, that, and the other, you really got to ask yourself, why are you doing that? Is it because you genuinely, wholeheartedly love BMWs and you're passionate and you're a car fanatic? That's your hobby and interest and everything in life to you, and it brings so much joy and happy? Or is it because you're kind of keeping up with the Joneses, or because you think, well, society expects this of me, right? I'm a dentist or a doctor or a realtor. I got to drive this really fancy car. What do people think of me if I don't? So you got to really understand. I mean, this takes a lot of kind of soul searching and looking deep, but at the end of the day, it's probably the latter in most cases for most people. And nothing wrong with those vehicles. I've owned nice vehicles like we talked about before. I chose to buy them used, pre-owned, and I don't think I've ever spent more than like 13 grand on a vehicle, but I have owned luxury vehicles. So there's ways to go about it, but it's to recognize that you're doing it for yourself, right? And not for others, right? Not trying to impress other people. So yeah, good point though.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I had on here was, so I probably say the most common transition that I see from people I've spoken with is what they'll do is they'll have this business, this big business, maybe they're fix and flippers or whatever, and they've gotten to the point where like, all right, I've got enough, or I'm ready to have more time freedom. And so what they'll do is, rather than just kind of selling everything, which is people, or sell portions of it and transition over to something else, they will completely automate the company, hire like a COO, and then they will spend like I was talking to one guy. He spends, I think he said he spends like a few hours a month on his business that he used to work 100 hours a week on, and then you can take that money that he's making and obviously grow that business, but also invest passively invest in other things. But then from there, he can just do really whatever it is he wants to do. And for this particular person, he started a mastermind group because he was still passionate about real estate. He just didn't really want to do the day-to-day stuff anymore. And so he started a mastermind group, and he was teaching other people how to do what he's doing. And so automating your business is another way to slowly get yourself out of it once you've hit that enough number. Mm-hmm. And I did want to mention one more thing, because you were talking earlier about pensions and how once you retire, it's not like you're just going to do nothing. And so my dad, for example, he retired, and he is a bus driver. Because he loves talking to people, and so every morning not now, but before COVID, every morning at 6 a.m. he'd go to the bus shop where the buses are, and all the other retired bus drivers are there, and they just talk for like about whatever for 2 hours. And that was he really enjoyed doing that. And so again, it doesn't have to be, it could be something as simple as, I like talking to people, so I'm going to do a part-time job where I'm doing something as simple as driving a bus or being a cashier, where I get to hang out with people all the time. So I thought that was also something interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know we're getting towards the end, but I do want to share this one thought that you just made me think of it. I know we're both kind of Tim Ferriss fans, and so I forget which book, 4 Hour Workweek or one of them, but he's sharing the story of, the New Yorker business guy that goes down to Mexico on a fishing trip, right? And this guy takes him out on the boat for a few hours, comes back, and he says, all right, thanks, that was great, it was amazing. Do you have more customers today? And he said, no, I only do the one trip a day and get some fish for my family and do this, He says, well, why don't you do more? Why don't you do like 5 trips a day? You got plenty of time to do it. And he's talking about, well, I like to come home, take a nap, visit with my wife, play with my kids in the evenings, have some tequila or whatever, and then play music with my friends. And that's my life. And he goes, well, the New Yorker, well, can you imagine though, what if you did more of these trips, made more money, you could buy 2 boats, then you could hire employees to run those boats, and then you could have a whole fleet of ships. And then when that gets successful, you bounce out of the business, then you could headquarter in the States, and then you could run this big operation, and then you could franchise it, and he goes, and the guy keeps asking him, and then what? And then what? And then what would I do? And then what would be after that? And he goes, and then you can retire and come down here and have a quality of life and spend time with your family and your friends and play money. It's like, the guy already had all that, you know, he already had the quality of life. That's one more example of having enough, you know, this guy already had that. So something to think about, just an awareness article in general. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a perfect example of someone who's just starting out and just getting a few, rental properties or passively investing in a few deals, and then just using that income, and then that's really it. You don't need to, as you mentioned, franchise, and oh yeah, that's a perfect story to definitely to end with. So, is there anything else you want to mention before we sign off?
I guess for anyone listening, just think about this question. You know, are your goals and your aspirations more set around kind of a quality of life, or having quantity, meaning money and numbers? You know, and I was guilty of this early on. When I would set goals, it was always money goals, right? I want to be, one of my first goals, I want to be a millionaire. I want to have 10,000 a month passive income, or I want, but when you dig a lot deeper, right, it's what do you really want out of life? Who cares about the money aspect? What if that wasn't the factor? How do you want to live your life? So that's really what the question is. And that's how I end the blog, on that note.
Perfect. Let's end the episode on that note as well. So thanks, Travis, again, for joining me for the Actively Passive Investing Show. Best ever listeners, as always, thank you for listening. Have a best ever day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.